Thank you, sir. We'll call the meeting to order, and this is the August 6, 2020 special call meeting of the City County Planning Commission. The first thing I would like to do is to give notice that the first item tonight for public hearing, docket number 2020-07 Jackie and Stephanie Hoffman and others had filed an application to amend the general development plan on property on West McClellan Road. That application has been withdrawn, so we'll not be hearing that tonight. So anybody who may be online that's listening, we want you to realize that that has been withdrawn. And our first item of business, I think everyone had a chance at our last meeting to meet Mr. Starks. He is our new appointee from Warren County. And I would like to ask Mr. Hampmore if he would administer the oath of office to Mr. Starks.
Thank you, Ms. Runner. Mr. Starks, if you're prepared to take the oath, if you would please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you'll support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth and be faithful and true to the Commonwealth of Kentucky so long as you continue a citizen thereof, and that you will faithfully execute to the best of your ability the office of Planning Commissioner according to law? And do you further solemnly swear that since the adoption of the present Constitution, you, being a citizen of this state, have not fought a duel with a deadly weapon within this state nor out of it, nor have you sent or accepted a challenge to fight a duel with deadly weapons, nor have you acted as a second in carrying a challenge, nor aided or assisted any person thus offending? If so, would you please answer, I do?
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Starks, and congratulations.
You all.
Thank you, both of you. I will ask Ms. Martin to please call the roll.
Get down.
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Balance?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Blackburn?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Gay?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Graham?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Ritchie?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Starks?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Unseld?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Vitale? Commissioner Volkert?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Warren? Commissioner Warren?
I think he wants to be on. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Chair Runner?
Yes, ma'am.
You've got 10.
The next item is the presentation of our audit. I didn't know Ms. Mooney was here and wanted to introduce Mr. Thornberry, or if he's going right ahead into the audit.
I can introduce him really quick. Stephen Thornberry from Hensley and Thornberry will be presenting our audit tonight. This is their second year to do our audit, and I've reviewed it and did not find any errors or any issues with it at all. They did a great job for us last year and this year as well. They were here for a little over a day or so, and then we worked remotely with them the next day. I guess that's about all. Stephen, I'll let you take it from there.
Thank you, Megan. Good afternoon, everyone. As Megan mentioned, this was our second year that we were able to assist the City County Planning Commission on the financial statement audit. I'm happy to report that we were able to offer a clean and unmodified opinion on those financial statements. Not only do we have a clean opinion to offer, but there were no adjusting journal entries to make either. And that simply speaks to the of organization and detail that not only Megan but Ben also has within the organization. On the financial statements, one of the first pages is that audit report. As I mentioned, We do have a clean opinion. No material modifications are needed in order for the financial statements to be in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Just a couple of financial highlights as I go through here, but the balance sheet shows total assets of cash at just over $2 million. 1.6 million of those are restricted for use of surety bonds, leaving the balance of $400,000 in unrestricted cash. From a revenue and expenditure standpoint for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2020, total revenues were just shy of $1.4 million. The expenditures were $1.7 million, generating a deficit of $365,000. The deficit there was really driven by the capital expenditures and the expenses associated with moving office locations to their new suite on State Street. That's really all I had to mention about the balance sheet and statement of revenues. As far as budget compliance, everything was in order with the budget compliance and adherence there. The actual revenues and receipts were about $61,000 over the budgeted amounts for last year, so a positive variance again of $60,000. And then the expenditures also came in with a positive variance. They were underneath the budget by amount of $355,000, and again there was some capital expenditures budget of $600,000, but expenses of only $300,000, which drove such a large positive variance from that standpoint. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to work with the commission. We enjoy working with Megan and all of the staff there. And again, clean audit report, and I'll be glad to answer any questions anyone may have over the financial statements or the audit from last year.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, do you have any questions concerning the audit? No questions? Then I would ask for a motion that we accept the audit.
Make a motion to accept the audit as presented.
Thank you, sir. We need a second.
Second.
Thank you.
Ms. Ballard, Commissioner Ballard,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Blackburn,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Gay,
Ma'am.
Commissioner Graham,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Ritchie,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Starks,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Unseld,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Volkert,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Warren,
Yes, ma'am.
Chair Runner.
Yes, ma'am. Motion carried. And want to thank both of you again for the audit and Ms. Megan for your work. We appreciate it. Approval of the minutes of the July 16th meeting. If there are no corrections to those minutes, I would ask for a motion for approval.
So moved.
Thank you. Can we need a second?
Second.
Commissioner Ballard, Commissioner Ballard,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Blackburn,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Gay,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Graham,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Ritchie,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Starks,
Ma'am.
Commissioner Unseld,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Volkert,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Warren,
Ma'am.
Chair Runner.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Moore.
Mr. Moore, you're still muted, sir.
Pardon me. Ms. Runner, I request that you order that the record include all statutory and regulatory provisions, the commission's entire file for each application on tonight's docket, the qualifications for each staff witness, and finally, I'd request that you administer the oath to the staff.
So ordered. Do you all swear to tell the truth before this commission?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you all. the subdivision and site development plans in the packet. Commissioners, you have any questions on those items? No questions, then we'll move on to letters of credit and performance bond. Just to make sure that you all noticed, we had some changes to those items. There were originally 5 items. If you would delete item number 4, and then we have 2 items to add. Item 6 will be to release the letter of credit for construction on Burr Oaks in the amount of $51,000 and replace with a cash bond in the reduced amount of $25,000 from Fairview Avenue Properties. And number 7 will be to release the cash bond for construction on Hardcastle Farms in the amount of $61,700 and replace with a letter of credit in the amount of $61,700 from H&A Development LLC. Have any questions on those items? No questions? Then I'd ask for a motion, please.
So moved.
Thank you. And just a second. Thank you.
Commissioner Balance,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Blackburn,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Clark,
Yes.
Commissioner Gay,
Ma'am.
Commissioner Graham,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Ritchie,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Starks,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Unseld,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Volkert,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Warren,
Ma'am.
Chair Runner.
Yes, ma'am. We do not have any unfinished business or new business before we go into the public hearing. As I announced earlier, the first item has been withdrawn. The next item will be 2020-08 DP Auburndale Gary Farms Blvd. And others have filed an application to amend the general development plan, which are the development plan conditions on tracts of land containing approximately 56.67 acres located at 0, 2205, 2233, 2313, 2321, 2305, 2345, and 2300 Gary Farms Boulevard, 0 and 1730 West Park Drive, and a portion of 2151 Scottsville Road. These properties are zoned planned unit development with a general development plan. So we will now hear the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Runner.
Thank you, ma'am.
We had a pre-application conference on April 14th for the properties you just mentioned, located on Gary Farms Boulevard, West Park Drive, and Scottsville Road. And the application that is before you this evening is for a development plan amendment in order to remove the current 200-foot setback requirement for an outdoor speaker system along the northern portion of the development adjacent to Eastland Park subdivision. So that would be this subdivision up here. The northern property line is what we're referencing. As you mentioned, the property is zoned PUD, planned unit development. The original zoning for the property was single family residential, and it was rezoned to one of our former zoning districts prior to the adoption of our current zoning ordinance, which was referred to as planned shopping center. Then it was converted to PUD in 2001 when the current ordinance was adopted. There was also a previous development plan amendment for the properties in 2001. The current use of the property is mixed. There are some properties that have already been developed for commercial use, and as you can see on the land use map, there are also some vacant parcels within the existing development. The future land use designation for the property is commercial. This future land use category consists of a broad array of commercial development, including individual commercial businesses that may exist along a highway corridor or a business district, as well as larger planned shopping centers and office parks. Gonna jump to the exhibit that was submitted with the development plan amendment, and you'll see the yellow line here that's highlighted. That delineates the current 200-foot setback that's required from the Eastland Park subdivision, or the northern property line here. And again, the amendment is proposing to remove that requirement, and that is listed In the development plan conditions section number 10, you'll see in your staff report that that language is proposed to be deleted. Moving on, a little later in the staff report, you'll see our zoning ordinance requirements. Section 312.8 of the zoning ordinance outlines the requirements for a development plan amendment and states that an amendment to any development plan condition for an approved development plan shall be approved only if the proposed amendment remains consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan and upon a finding that there have been major changes of an economic, physical, or social nature within the area of the property in question which were not anticipated at the time of the adoption of the general development plan or development plan condition which is being amended, or that there have developed physical conditions which would not permit development of the property in question in accordance with the development plan or condition which is being amended. And so you'll see that the applicants provided a brief narrative as a part of their application to help address the findings required for a development plan amendment. And this narrative states that changes in the zoning ordinance now allow for the use of an outdoor speaker to be within 100 feet of a residential district. Previously, it was required to be 250 feet. The revised development plan conditions are proposed to reflect this current standard. So that was, again, the information provided by the applicants to justify the amendment to this development plan condition. Next, moving on to our Focus 2030 category review, staff evaluated 8 items from the comprehensive plan. 2 of those items were found to be in compliance, and there were 6 items that the Planning Commission should evaluate for compliance. I'm going to touch on those real quick here. The first being LU 1.1.3. The Planning Commission should determine if the elimination of the additional setback for a speaker system is compatible with the area. Next, LU 2.5, the Planning Commission should determine if the proposal will stabilize and protect nearby established neighborhoods. Next, LU 252, the Planning Commission should determine if the proposal is compatible with the surrounding area. Next, HN1 and HN1.3, the Planning Commission should determine if the proposed amendment preserves and enhances the character of the area. And finally, ED1, if the proposed amendment will help to diversify the local economy. Just touching on a few things in the staff review summary there. Again, the proposal is to remove the 200-foot setback for a speaker system along the northern boundary. And then just to kind of confirm the information provided by the applicants, if some of you will recall, in 2018, the zoning ordinance was amended to reduce the separation requirement from a residential district to 100 feet for an eating establishment with a speaker. So for a drive-through or pickup window, essentially. And then in 2019, the zoning ordinance was also amended to reduce the separation requirement from a residential district structure or use to 100 feet for retail uses utilizing a speaker in conjunction with a drive-through or pickup window. So if the Planning Commission were to approve the proposed amendment this evening, the properties along the northern side of the development would still be subject to the 100-foot setback required by the zoning ordinance for any use that would utilize an outdoor speaker system. I think one quick thing I'll reference here, the applicants also provided a conceptual layout for a potential use that could utilize an outdoor speaker system in conjunction with the use. And you'll see again that existing 200-foot setback would not accommodate the use that's proposed on this lot. However, the building shown on this concept plan here would meet the 100-foot setback required by the zoning ordinance. So with that, I'm going to jump back and wrap up with the points to consider on page 1. First, the development plan amendment is consistent with the future land use map and commercial future land use category. The proposed development plan amendment complies with the applicable criteria addressed in the site characteristics review and with a majority of the review criteria for site design. And the Planning Commission should consider if the proposed changes to the general development plan are compatible with the surrounding area. That is all I have for the staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just for clarification, if I may, the only amendment here is to remove the speaker requirement. Is that correct?
That's correct. There are no other changes proposed this evening.
And based on your recollection, there was a 200-foot requirement at the time of this zoning?
So just looking back in the zoning history, the original rezoning occurred back in 1999. I can't speak to the zoning ordinance requirements at that time, but the binding element that was adopted in 1999 restricted the setback to the 200-foot requirement that is proposed to be amended this evening. Now, sometime between the original zone change and now, the zoning ordinance actually required a 250-foot setback. So for a while, even though the requirement of the binding elements were 200, because the zoning ordinance required a more restrictive setback of 250, that would have applied at that time. However, we've since amended it again back to 100. And so now they're just requesting to follow the current zoning ordinance requirement of 100 feet.
Let's see, thank you.
You're welcome.
Rachel, can you tell us what that's going to be? We can't, I mean, on this drawing, it's so tiny. I assume it's a restaurant?
Well, this is just a concept, and the applicants may want to speak to this. I can try and zoom in. I think the layout that's shown on here is for a bank. Let me scroll over here. You can kind of see on the layout. There's three lanes kind of on the left-hand side of the building here. So from a bird's eye view on this concept, it would appear to be a bank. However, this condition that's proposed to be amended would be for any development along the northern property line. So that could include a restaurant with a drive-through or a bank or any other retail use that may have a speaker.
Okay. Well, just a history on this. I was at all these meetings, and this neighborhood is it was very contentious meetings with this neighborhood group. And they were more or less promised the fact that there wouldn't be these speakers in their backyard. That was one of their biggest concerns back then. And I don't know how many, if any, are here to talk about that. But as a history point, those are very contentious parts of this neighborhood. And I would hope that we would keep that in consideration, because they were really upset about all this. And we're hoping there would never be speakers in their backyard if they were out back grilling or anything.
Any other comments from the commissioners before we open it up to the applicant? No other questions? Then we'll hear from the applicant.
Yes, I hope you can hear me. This is Larry Hinton with Reynolds Johnson here. I'm the applicant. I have Scott Gary here with me for Auburndale Gary Lefty Partnership too. And I believe we have Brian Shirley with Arnold Consulting Engineering attending the meeting. In answer to your question, the drawing is the applicant has got a financial institution. So this would be just like when you go to a drive-in window and you're depositing your checks. That's what this is, and you can't fit a building on the lot for a financial institution with the current existing 200-foot setback. So all we have done, the only change that's been made to the original statement of binding elements is to remove that requirement, so we default back to current rules and regulations ordinance. So that is all we are doing right now. We actually have a financial institution that is looking at that lot. And this speaker won't be used in the evenings. It's it's not like a restaurant or anything. That just trying to we're trying to get this little hurdle jumped over during the due diligence period for the financial institution that I don't want to disrupt that has interest in this property.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any questions for the applicant? from the commissioners?
Is there any particular reason why they're doing the whole site and not just this one development for this? Because that's going to allow speakers over every part of this then. Is that correct?
I'm going to let Brian Hester. I'm pretty sure that the part I'm really doing that because we're just trying to come into conformity with current ordinance.
But staff, wouldn't that allow, if they do all the property, wouldn't that allow all these other businesses to change their outdoor speaking systems?
Well, let me jump back to the land use map here really quick. So right now there's only a small portion along the northern portion of the property for which the proposed amendment relates to that's undeveloped. So can you all see my hand on the screen? Yeah. So
no.
In the northeast corner, you'll see on the land use map that it's vacant. So the majority of the northern portion of the property is already developed, of course, with Home Depot and Gordon Food Service. To my recollection, those businesses wouldn't historically have incorporated any sort of outdoor speaker.
Definitely not at the back of them.
So I guess really we're just looking at this northeasternmost portion of the property where this would even be applicable.
I would also think since the year 2000 or 1999 that there's been a great deal of improvement in speakers to where they wouldn't have to be as loud as maybe they were at that time.
If I may, I'd like to make one more point as well and direct your attention to the buffering item, which is number 2 on their development plan conditions. I'm sure most of you have been out there and seen the privacy fence with the columns that is installed out there. That applies to that entire property line of that development, so that bank would be held to that same buffering and screening requirement, which should help some with noise. I would hope as well. Just going to point that
out. I wouldn't think this is much of an issue. I mean, they just seem to be getting into compliance with what's the ordinance out there right now.
Anything else from the commissioners before I see if there's anyone else online that would like to address this application?
This is Larry Hinton. I would like to ask if Ryan Shirley has anything else to say about this. He's done all the conceptual plans for this prospective use of the property.
Thank you, sir. I'll swear Mr. Shirley in and let him make a statement. You'd state your name and address for us, please.
Brian Shirley, 1136 South Park Drive, Bowling Green, Kentucky.
And you swear to tell the truth?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Thank you, sir.
And I'd like to just kind of reiterate what Ben said. The buffering and screening between the commercial and Eastland Park, that's already been installed, and it's been there for years. The fence and the trees that were required as part of the original development. And we're having to amend this, or we're wanting to amend this to meet the current standard, but we have to include the entire property because it was part of the original zoning. Am I correct, Ben? He's muted.
Yeah, that is correct. It does apply to that entire development, and in this case, that requirement's across that entire property line.
Right. And then the original rezonings, the people who were there were concerned about like car lots that have paging systems that are broadcasting out over the entire property trying to track somebody down. I don't think Home Depot even has a system like that, especially in the rear. They have one internal, but not external. So what we're trying to do is just, to be able to get a financial institution in, and like people were saying a while ago, the speaker systems have evolved over the years. And I would bet if you stood near that property line on our side of the fence, you wouldn't be able to hear what they're saying. They're a better quality now and a lot lower volume than what they used to be.
And Mr. Shirley, when this was originally zoned, that privacy fence and that landscape buffer were not present. Is that correct?
When the original property was rezoned, you're correct. That was just a part of the original Gary Farm. And
so those have been installed subsequent to that rezoning.
Right. Part of that original rezoning was a binding element, which would now be a development plan condition, that the wood fence with columns every 60 to 70 feet be installed. And that has been installed along with the trees, the double row trees that was required at that time.
I see. All right. Thank you.
Any other comments? Do we have any opposition to this request? No other comments and no opposition? Then I'll call for a motion, please.
Make a motion to approve the proposed general development plan amendment docket number 2028 DP based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing. The proposed general development plan amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 comprehensive plan as demonstrated by its compliance with the objective and action items presented in the staff report. Further, I also find that there has been major changes of economic, physical, social nature within the area of the property in question, and I request that the findings of fact and recommendation include a summary of evidence and testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Thank you. We need a second.
Second.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Balance?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Blackburn?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Gay?
Ma'am.
Commissioner Graham?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Ritchie?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Starks?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Unseld?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Volkert?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Warren?
Ma'am.
Chair Runner?
Yes, ma'am. The motion carried. Next is item 3. That is docket number 2020-10 Bloom. Thies and Contract Incorporated has filed an application for a future land use map amendment on a portion of a tract of land containing approximately 1.66 acres located at 60 the Trace Drive from agriculture to rural density residential. And should that application pass on docket number 2020-34Z County, the applicants have also have an application to rezone that land from agriculture to residential estate. And we'll have the staff report, please.
Thank you, Chair Runner. We had a pre-application conference on July 7th for the property you see there outlined in yellow. As Chair Runner's already stated, the current zoning on that property is agriculture. Its current use is also agriculture. And future land use map is agriculture, which the applicants have requested a change tonight to rural density residential. I will bring up this that we can discuss here in just a second. But the applicants, after the future land use map amendment, if that is successful, they would like to rezone in order to consolidate that 1.66 acres with the probably I'll toggle back and forth. What you see here in the dark line is what we're looking at, what we're considering, and then they would like to consolidate all of that into what you see here, which would result in one 3.74 acre tract. That resulting density would be 0.27 dwelling units per acre. Looking on the first page of your staff report under compatibility with comprehensive plan, we already mentioned the future land use map amendment request. The proposed RE zone is listed as a potentially compatible zoning designation in the rural density residential flume category. and may be appropriate if this body determines that the proposed development is compatible with the surrounding area. I'll just note in the compatibility with surrounding development, there are a few mature trees located on the property, on the portion of the property proposed to be rezoned. Look there on page 2, you see language out of the comprehensive plan that discusses the future land use map categories, and LU 114 procedures there for amending the future land use map. The applicants have submitted the following narrative to address that. The applicant said, "We are requesting a future land use map amendment from agriculture to residential to match the proposed RE zoning. The subject property will be subject to the same private restrictions as the current properties in the Trace subdivision and would thus be compatible with the existing residences within the development. Since the subject property is to be combined with lots 15 and 16 of the Trace subdivision, the requested amendment to the future land use map would not result in any development that exceeds the capacity of existing infrastructure." I'm going to go ahead and skip on to page 3, where we have the general development plan and where you would normally see development plan conditions there. However, in this case, staff did not require the submittal of development plan conditions because the 2 existing lots located on the Trace Drive, referring to these 2 right here, they would be consolidated with the 1.6 acre tract. And these do not have binding elements or development plan conditions. So staff didn't require them because it would only apply to the 1.66 acres being rezoned. So you would have a portion of ultimately one property with development plan conditions and the rest would not. So staff did not require development plan conditions in this case, but the applicant did submit some information to address the findings of fact required for a zone change. The applicant said, "The portion of the subject property desired to be combined with lots 15 and 16 as shown on the rezoning exhibit does not meet the minimum lot size requirements for ag zone property. For this reason, and in order to combine said portion of the subject property with lots 15 and 16, we are requesting the zoning for the subject property to be changed from ag to RE. Although the proposed lot will be absent of any binding elements or development plan conditions, it will still be subject to the same private restrictions as the current properties in the Trace subdivision and thus be compatible with existing residences within the development." Going on to page 4 of your staff report, you see there the Focus 2030 category review. There are 6 items there, all of which are up to your determination. LU 111 and LU 112, this proposal may comply with those if deemed compatible with the surrounding area. The Flume Amendment to Rural Density Residential is approved, and if this body determines that the proposal is compatible and complies with LU 113. The proposal may comply with LU 2 and LU 21. The Planning Commission should determine if the proposal is a high-quality development that includes design standards tailored to preserve the character of the area. And you all should also determine if the proposal will enhance Warren County's rural and agricultural heritage, including its agricultural landscapes and view sheds, and if it complies with NCR 2.4. With that, I will go back to the first page where we have our points to consider. First one there is that this body should consider if the argument provided by the applicant to amend the future land use map meets the criteria outlined in LU 114 of the comprehensive plan. If the future land use map amendment is approved, the proposal would be consistent with the Flume and rural density residential category. Second item, the proposed development complies with the majority of the site characteristics review criteria for site design and meets the minimum requirements of the zoning ordinance. And the last point, compatibility of the proposed development should be determined by the Planning Commission. So that is all I have for the staff report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ramsey. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
So Monica, if I understand correctly, they're actually taking 2 lots and combining those 2 lots to a single lot and adding the property behind that lot. Is that an accurate summary?
That is correct. What you see here, Commissioner Graham, would be the what they would hope to be the end result, that this would all be combined.
Okay, so our density actually goes down in this case. The other question is regarding those restrictions for for the existing subdivision. Has staff confirmed that those are indeed in place?
I mean, there are private restrictions out there, but we would not enforce private restrictions.
I see.
All that we would be able to enforce is what's in the zoning ordinance, and if there were development plan conditions or binding elements, but we cannot enforce private restrictions.
Okay, and so none of the other lots have binding elements recorded as well. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that is correct. I'll go back to the zoning map. So you'll see there all the others, residential estate lots there, and they are just zoned residential estate with no binding elements.
I see. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I will clarify something on the homeowners association and those restrictions. They are in place. Rachel, myself, and Josh Moore have met at least a couple of times with the homeowners association, those existing neighbors, as well as Mr. Thesson and others. Those are still in place. That homeowners association is active, so they will still be in play with the development of this property as well.
Great, thank you.
Have any other questions? Do we have anything that the applicant would like to add? Anything from the applicant? Do we have anyone online with any questions? Do we have any opposition to this request? No opposition, no questions, then I'll ask for a motion. The first one for the Flume Amendment.
Make the motion to approve the proposed future land use map amendment docket number 2020-10 Flume, based on the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing. The proposed Flume amendment has met the directive to amend the Flume as outlined in LU 114 and in the comprehensive plan. Further request that this motion include a summary of evidence testimony presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Thank you. Second. Thank you, ma'am.
Commissioner Balance?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Blackburn?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Day?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Graham?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Ritchie?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Stark?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Unseld?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Volkert?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Warren?
Ma'am.
Chair Runner?
Yes, ma'am. The motion carried. Now I'll ask for a motion on the zone change request.
Make the motion to approve the proposed zoning map amendment together with and condition upon a general development plan docket number 2020-32 County, based upon the testimony and documents presented in this public hearing. The proposed zoning map amendment is consistent with the adopted Focus 2030 comprehensive plan. It's demonstrated by its compliance with the objective and the actions presented in the staff report. Therefore, a proposed zoning map amendment is in agreement with the adopted comprehensive plan. Further, request this motion include a summary of and evidence presented by the witnesses at this public hearing.
Thank you, sir. We need a second.
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 Thank you.
Commissioner Balance?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Blackburn?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Day?
Ma'am.
Commissioner Graham?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Ritchie?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Starks?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Unseld?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Volkert?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Warren?
Ma'am.
Chair Runner?
Yes, ma'am. The motion carried. Our recommendation will be for approval. Thank you. Discussion items. Mr. Peterson, do you have anything for us, sir?
Oh, ma'am.
Anything from the commissioners? Nothing else? Thank you all, and meeting is adjourned.
Aye.